I can tell you a little bit. I'm Steve Helmin. I'm from GLENFarmland, and Sarah got it right. GLENFarmland's Allied for Responsible Management of Land. As I was watching Sarah's presentation, I saw all the similarities between the Hecate project and the projects that we're fighting in the town of Glen. We have a contractor, a developer who's trying to put in a 250 megawatt industrial scalar solar facility that's going to be 2,000 plus acres. And then they bumped it up to 350. They did a second NYSERDA contract. And then right next to us, and a couple of the people who live in the town right next door, they're looking at 300 megawatts from another out-of-state company. We're a community group that we're composed all of volunteers, and we're also self-funded. And this project that's going on in Glen actually is being funded, or rather, is a venture capital firm right out of Houston, Texas. So it's being funded, ironically, with oil and gas VC money. So, you know, anyone who sees a separation there is probably living in an interesting world. Okay, so Glen is actually in the Mohawk Valley, and we are, if you're exit 28 on the thruway, if you're familiar with that, we're about 10 minutes west of Amsterdam, about 40 minutes west of Albany. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to talk about two things. I have 10 minutes. I'm going to make it quick. We're going to talk about the threat. Can I take this with me? I think I can. Look at that. So we're going to talk about the threat of Part N and the need for a rural coalition. Two things that we want to talk about. So what is Part N? That's it, right over the side. It's one page. It's included in the governor's 2023 budget request, and it attempts to enshrine a developer-friendly model, a valuation model, the same valuation that's done on your homes, for industrial scale wind and solar electric plants, except that this one's a lot better than the one that's on your house. It seeks to sidestep also a lawsuit that's brought by Schoharie County towns seeking their fair share, and it would cheat host municipalities out of their fair share. Why did this happen? Why are we talking about it now? Because it's in the budget. Everything bad happens in the budget. Section 94C was in the 2020 budget. It carried ORES and gave them sole discretion in citing large-scale industrial plants, as Sarah was telling about. And then last year, in 2021, they came up with an appraisal model. And this model actually fails to provide for fair revenue for municipalities, and has valuations that are from half to 20% what these things are worth, right? So if your county, your town, your school district, your community is forced to actually host one of these plants, it will mean reduced tax revenue and less money to compensate for the negative impacts to the community. And then again, in Budget 2023, we have Part N, which actually enshrines these things and tries to backdate it back to 2021. I say property taxes on solar wind? What taxes? What others are saying? New York State Assessors Association. This is on the model on 2021. Discount rates used are too high. The discounted cash flow methodology has not been accepted as a proper valuation tool for utility property, such as power plants, hydroelectric dams, poles, wires, and fiber optics. So these power plants, solar and wind power plants, are getting a special deal. They're not like any other power plants, obviously, and so they get a special deal out of New York State tax apprentice that, excuse the French, screws over our municipalities. And even worse, the municipalities, even when they're doing this model, have no mechanism to enforce the proper and full reporting of installation inventory information, because They can ask the companies what they have there. The companies don't have to tell them. New York State Association of Counties, that's just this year. They remain concerned over state actions that usurp local decision-making and home rule authority. And the assessment model developed provides highly reduced assessments based on the investments being made. They're getting a deal, folks, with our ratepayer and taxpayer money. So why does the state want Part N? They think they get out from under their lawsuit that they think they're losing. There's actually a temporary restraining order preventing this model from being used right now. Tax gives us any value it wants, or the project developers want, for wind and solar electric projects with little public oversight because they're exempting the model from the State Administrative Procedures Act. Lower taxes for these developers mean greater incentives for the foreign and out-of-state solar and wind companies that are wanting to build in upstate New York. So why fight our Part N? Part N enshrines a developer-friendly valuation model and increases company profits. The opportunity for profit is what attracting these companies here. They're not building down south where the sun is better. They're building up here because there's incentives and huge contracts from NYSERDA. If these developers find it more difficult to make huge profits and to make them quickly, maybe they'll go elsewhere or decide it's not worth the financing. So we need a set of hurdles. The state keeps clearing them all away. We need to think about how we preserve them. So that's Part N. I can talk for hours on it probably, but that's the high view, and we're trying to keep the time. Please stop by the GLENFarmland table, and I can provide some more information. There's also a couple of other experts around who can speak to it. A Rural Communities Coalition. We've been fighting for over 2 years in Glen, here in Copake and Curryville. They've been fighting, I think, even longer. So, I mean, it's imperative that for our voices to get heard, we come together and create a coalition. These are all pictures from my town, and that sneaky little guy in the lower left-hand corner, he was after my garden, so, you know. So rural communities are being targeted. This is a heat map right off the state's website, data.ny.gov, of Tier 1, those are greater than 20 megawatt solar projects in New York State. The thing to take away from this is you see where the projects are being built, and you see where the projects aren't being built. And here's some of the data behind it. These are active Tier 1 wind and solar projects. On the left, it's only about counts. Those are counts of projects. On the right, we have the number of megawatts. Montgomery County, which is where I come from, leads the state. Nearly a gigawatt for 50,000 people. A gigawatt of electricity is being slated, for generation in Montgomery County. Columbia and Greene together are about 250 megawatts. We were told that 250 megawatts is enough to power 65,000 homes. So a gigawatt, for example, in Montgomery County is more than enough power to serve everyone in Montgomery, and I believe Fulton County is, when I last sat down and did the figures, which also has about 50,000 people, for 10 years, for a decade. So all this energy, it ain't being used here. Many rural communities are economically disadvantaged, and solar and wind's not going to change that, right? Here's kind of a blow-up of the Greater Capital District. Those purple areas up to the left are the western, mid and western part of Montgomery County. I live in the one that's closest to Schenectady there, and that census tract that you're seeing there is the towns of Root and Glen, and that's where 650 megawatts is planned for. And as you can see, there's a pretty good correlation here in the Hudson Valley too of where those projects are planned and where in the disadvantaged communities. We've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, upstate communities should be overjoyed. You're getting this huge cash infusion, and all these short-term construction jobs." Well, yeah, no. Every acre that's paved with glass and steel means fewer farm jobs and fewer equipment dealers because it disrupts the agricultural economy, reduce property values, reduce tourism. I mean, Sarah went through half of the same ideas here. Abandoned homesteads, which we have enough of in the Mohawk Valley, you know, people are already leaving. Fewer opportunities for residents and businesses, and the important point, the lease agreements only enrich some individual landowners. They don't help build community, and it's about our communities that we're trying to protect. So why work together? Provide consistent, persistent, and effective messaging to policymakers and stakeholders statewide. Establish, maintain, and extend a working relationship with the press. Reverse the punitive aspects of Section 94C. Be a voice for rural New York in a policy landscape that's been consistently deaf to the concern of New York's rural areas. Advocate for state-level ombudsman and change the mindset. Industrial-scale wind and solar in rural communities is not a net gain. And we need to expose the exploitation that is turning upstate New York into sprawling energy colonies. A couple of other things here. Take the fight to protect our communities to the state level. That's where the changes were made. That's where we got to fix them. Modify the way NYSERDA conducts its Tier 1 RFPs because they seem to be just finding the lands upstate and the poorer areas where land is cheap. And push for greater oversight on NYSERDA's activities. Engage on bills and initiatives in front of the legislature, and support the activities of member organizations or local governments through interaction, shared documents, shared strategies, and shared experiences. And then pursue strategic partnerships where they make sense. No one else is advocating for rural New York communities. It's up to us.